Man, I can't believe that random guy came into my house and dropped a nuke on me.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Dude, what is happening? I wonder if there's a person who could help explain all these bosses in my basement to me.
Go faster! Hey, what's the holdup?
Hey, I think I'm gonna be late. Can you cover for me?
I'll see what I can do.
Well...
I guess I'll go Google it. Monsters in my basement ranking. Damn, my mom turned the internet off.
Hey there, Isaac. I heard you needed somebody to teach you about these bosses.
What the hell? Where'd you come from?
Well, worry not, my friend, because this is the boss tier list video. Here is a giant tier list board I ordered off the dark web. For you, Isaac, we're gonna be ranking all the bosses in your basement.
Well, that's helpful, but how is this gonna work?
Well, I'm gonna be basing this ranking off of how fun I find these bosses to be. I've fought all of them to prepare for this video, and I've determined a ranking of the fun meter of all these bosses. The higher on the list, the more fun they are to fight. I'll explain the reasons why I feel this way about every boss, and there are a lot of them. I want you to also know is that some of them may not be as fun to fight as other bosses, but I have other reasons to put them higher up on the list. So let's strap in, and let's get right into F tier. This guy is, definitely something. Gritty Jr. is my least favorite boss in the whole game. If you aren't fast enough to dodge their charge, then you better be ready to take some damage. This is the most annoying boss to fight in the game for me, so it lands Gritty Jr. at the bottom of F tier. I'm sure you guys were expecting this one. Ultra Greedier is probably the most unfair fight in the entire game, but that's largely due to where you fight him. Greedier mode is the only way to fight Ultra Greedier. And boy oh boy, isn't Greedier mode so much fun! You get less coins in Greedier than you do in Greed mode, so you better hope for a D20 or some good items in the item rooms in Devil/Angel deals, or else you won't have enough money to supply yourself enough items to actually deal with Ultra Greedier. His coin attacks will explode on impact, making them insanely hard to dodge unless you can outrange him or have bomb immunity. And this guy is one tanky bitch. There's a lot I can say about Ultra Greedier, but I'm sure you all understand why he's at the bottom of F tier. Oh boy, a boss that you can only shoot from behind? How original! Mask of Infamy is a pain in the ass, and there's no pun intended there. Sure, the fight isn't too difficult, but god, if you don't have piercing tears, this is such a slog of a fight. The heart is no big deal, but once you kill the heart, you have to kill the mask. The mask will charge at you over and over again, facing you anytime you decide to stand in one of the 4 directions it can charge. This wouldn't be that big of a deal, except for the fact that you have to shoot it in the back. So, good luck getting behind the mask whenever it will immediately turn around and ram itself into you when you try to. Fuck you to the Mask of Infamy. This is our first grouped entry. There will be a lot on this list as a lot of the bosses are very similar to each other. So I've just decided to group them together. The Gurg and Turdlings are very annoying. They're like mini Gurdy Juniors that will try to slam into you. The fast champion version of the Gurglings are especially annoying to deal with, and the fact that the Turdlings will spawn 4 little shits every time they charge is really obnoxious, and I always get hit by at least one during a fight. However, they're not Gurdy Jr., so at least there's that. Okay, look, I know the haunt isn't that bad, but god, I am just so tired of seeing this guy. It is easily the hardest boss in the basement, unless you get Headless Horseman, but we'll get into that later. It is so stressful to have to carefully follow the attack to try to not get blasted by a brimstone laser. I'm sorry, Haunt, but you are in F tier. Okay, what the fuck is up with the womb bosses? I'm serious. Like, look at this guy. He's literally a buffed version of an enemy that's whole purpose is to do nothing. I mean, oh my god, this fight is so boring. I'll get to this later on the list, but Who decided to make the womb bosses so weak? It's not that big of a deal though, as you only fight them before having to face Mom's heart anyway. Oh, what about Blastoise? I know you guys are probably tired of me complaining, but I hate this guy with a burning passion. The adversary is not that bad once you learn his patterns, but oh my god! I have been hit with his stupid homing brimstone attack so many times. Why do you have to do this to me? Either way, the fight is at least a bit more fun once you learn how to fight him, so that's why he's in the bottom of D tier. This guy. This is the hard boss. The one everybody complained about. The one that made anyone let out an audible groan when they had to fight him. I mean, his eyes were literally nerfed in Repentance to make up for that. Well, I mean, kind of. It was technically a bug fix. He is so famously obnoxious that he was made to be the boss of every floor in the April Fool Challenge to troll players. But how do I feel about the bloat? He's alright. Speaking of nerfs, the Matriarch is definitely one of the ones that needed it the most, and it actually took a pretty hard one on Repentance. The Fistuloid enemy, which she spawns, became much slower and more telegraphed, making them easier to dodge, and she even spawns less of them. As somebody who had 100% of the save in Afterbirth Plus, I hated fighting her. She used to be terrible, and if she didn't get nerfed a bit, she would have probably been a lot lower, but she's okay now, I suppose. D tier for the Matriarch. Mama Gertie is in D tier for one reason and one reason alone, and it's this fucking attack. Who the fuck decided that there should be a random spike attack that can hit you without you even knowing where it'll be? Shame on you, Mama Gertie. Another group set of bosses for Teratoma and Fistula. These guys are the exact same, except one spawns spiders when you break their small pieces, and the other spawns chargers. They're a fine boss, but they're incredibly boring. They're not hard, and they basically have no health. They fit better as a mini-boss more than an actual boss. They're just a bigger envy. D tier for the two big balls. Remember what I said earlier about Mask of Infamy? Well, Carrion Queen has the exact same gimmick. Okay, maybe I just have a disdain for hitting enemies in the back, but oh my god, why do they both have to be charging enemies? At least Carrion Queen can be killed with bombs, and she has a second phase where she bounces off the walls instead of charging you. But oh my god, I despise bosses where you have to shoot them in the back. Carrion Queen can take the D on this one. Clutch is a very weird boss for me. He was leaked in the files of Repentance and was said to be unfinished, and then they added him to the game and barely changed anything. I don't know if it's just me, but there's just something about his design that just feels unfinished. And it definitely doesn't help that I don't find his fight particularly fun. The skeleton fighting gimmick is annoying, and his second phase scares me. It could be a lot worse though, so here he is at D tier. Guys, I don't want to have to do this again. Here is Skolex, another boss that needs to be hit from behind. Well, kind of. He has a weak spot on his tail and can poke it out of the ground sometimes. It's not as bad as the other ones that you have to hit from behind, but as I said before, wound bosses are just incredibly easy to fight. Skolex is a pin reskin, who isn't very hard to beat. So the only thing that really makes Skolex any more difficult is the weak spot on the tail. This just makes it a very boring fight. I understand why people like Great Gideon, and the idea is neat, but fighting him is just so boring. It isn't a hard fight, which is fine, but it takes so much longer than other easier bosses, because you have to clear 6 greed mode styled waves, as he shoots random shots at you. He always just kills my momentum, and feels like he's actively wasting my time. But I will say that the Chaos card being able to one-tap him for a secret crawl space is super neat, and is a really unique gimmick for this boss. The Stain is a cute boy, but I do not like fighting it. It hides in the ground, and only pops out if it's close to you. and will either slap you with its tentacles or spew red tears at you. He is a fine boss, but I really don't like fighting him as much as an easier counterpart. Rag Mega is another boss that is fine, but it's just way too easy. He's a bit more difficult than Ragman, as you have to dodge the purple balls and spawn Raglings that jump after you. But man, he just has no health. If you're strong enough, you can quickly destroy him before he can even go invincible. Rag Mega is cool, but I wish he was a bit harder. So he falls into D tier. Mr. Fred, oh how I feel for those bosses affected by the curse of the womb. As I mentioned before, bosses in the womb are criminally easy for how late the floor is. I mean, there are enemies in Shoal and Cathedral that I find harder than this guy. And you will most likely have the exact same items you do when you fight this guy as you do on those floors. Mr. Fred is just way too easy, and his fight is super boring. But he's pretty cute, so I will give him the top of D tier. I can't tell you how many times I've been to the corpse and just hoped and prayed that the Scourge wasn't the guy I had to fight. After all these years of repentance being out, I still haven't deciphered its attack patterns. You just rarely get to fight the corpse bosses, so they're actually the bosses I understand the least in this game. This guy is super scary to fight, but I will say, from here on out, all of these bosses are at least fun. If you have the proper items, this guy is a good challenge and a decent fight. Rot Gut is a cool boss with a super unique idea of having multiple phases that happen in different areas. The first happens in the boss room, and then you get sucked inside, and you have to fight the next phase from a sideways angle, and then an upside down angle. The only real issue is that these phases are a little unbalanced. The first phase is super easy, the second phase is really weird, and then the final phase sprays tears, and it's hard to know where to stand to dodge. I prefer Rot Gut over the Scourge though, so it gets to be right above him. The Visage is an upgraded version of the fucking Mask of Infamy! But, let me calm down a bit, because this boss is very, very different. If I was judging this list off of designs alone, this guy would be F+ tier, because god damn, they are cool as shit! I really like that the heart is the main thing that you fight in this battle too. The mask will still come for you, and can still be damaged from the back, but if you kill the heart, you win the fight, which is just so much better than the Mask of Infamy fight. Though, you are still the Mask of Infamy, even if you are different. So, you reside in the C tier. The Pile is pretty cool. He's an upgraded version of the Stain, and he is a spooky skeleton, and will charge at you and spew bones at you. And he's actually kind of hard to fight for an Ash Pit boss. He gets a little bit points deducted for his spike attack, because that shit is really annoying to dodge. But I still do like this guy. Wormwood is a cool take on the pin style of bosses, though he can't beat the OG. Sliding on the ground and trying to stab you with his tail stuff is great, and I love to see unique takes on older bosses like this. He is kind of stressful to fight though, especially in the mirror world, but to be honest, he's just the most unfun of the Downpour and Dross bosses. Brownie is a pretty fun variant of the Poop bosses. By the time you get to fight Brownie, you're already most likely well equipped to deal with its dips that it spawns, and it's a pretty simple and easy fight. Brownie is just a relaxing little bout before you go get mollywopped by Mom. The Heretic is a really cool take on the Haunt, and I really like the design it has. It has really unique attacks, and it's a fun addition to the game, but it's the hardest out of the Mausoleum and Gehenna bosses, and can hit you with unavoidable damage with the Brimstone Fire attack sometimes. Also, bosses with death attacks are kind of annoying. It's definitely cool though, so upper C tier for you. Big Horn is a very fair fight. The phases and patterns are easy to understand, and he's not all that hard to beat. That's honestly all I have to say about Big Horn. He's not all that interesting or anything, but I'd much rather fight him than some of the bosses lower on this list. Finally, we have the top of C tier, Bumbino. This guy is a cool boss to be added into the game. We always love more Bumbo representation. The one thing that holds me back from putting him any higher is his stupid fucking charge attack, which he can basically do whenever he wants and can be unavoidable in the wrong spots. Also, he has a gimmick where he can take your coins and pay out an item, but it's not even worth getting hit for. But now, it's the time to get into the good stuff, because we're finally at Ultra Greed. The one that doesn't turn into Ultra Greedier is a really cool evolution of the Greed mini-boss. Regular Greed mode means that you can stock up on a lot of nice items before fighting him, and dealing with him isn't too bad. He spawns lots of coins and can overwhelm you with key coins that open his doors and spawn the scary boys, if you aren't strong enough. But other than that, the fight is pretty fair. Also, we can't forget that sweet, sweet Ultra Greed booty. Delirium is notorious for his telefragging and being the literal hardest boss in the game, which I still think is true in Repentance. The only reason Delirium isn't lower on the list is because he is completely optional. Other bosses that are obnoxiously hard to fight can spawn at any time or are even mandatory. Bloat can always appear, you always have to fight Ultra Greedier, and the Mask of Infamy can kiss my ass! Delirium serves as a wonderful final hurrah option after you've basically finished your run, or have a crazy run you have used to speedrun through Hush. But still, this guy is hard as shit, and unfairly so. I think the bottom of B tier is fitting for this white, gooey, blob of, Dark One is a cute little demon boy that'll charge you and shoot brimstone and tears and, turn the room dark. Those are basically all of his attacks, but he's still a decent challenge. I much prefer him over his upgraded counterpart, and I think that he's pretty alright. Another combo, we have Chad and Chub. These bosses are both literally the same thing. It's just that Chad gets smaller as you hit him, and will drop himself as an item. They can both be cheesed by bombs, and they're fairly simple, big, chunky maggots. I would put Chad below Chub, since Little Chad is a shit item, and I would much rather have a regular boss item than that. Dangle is a cool upgraded version of Dingle. He's a basement boss, so he's simple, and he doesn't have many crazy attacks, but he's a decently fun fight as long as you don't get something bad in your item room. He's definitely harder than Dingle, but he only spawns 1/4 as often as Dingle does, so you won't see him too much. Next up is Mega Fatty. This guy's cool, and big, and jumps a lot. I don't really know what else to say about this guy. So here is a picture of my cat to make up for it. The cage is an upgraded version of Mega Fatty that's harder and gray. He rolls around like a little ball, but not as annoyingly as something like Gertie Jr. does. The rock waves are a bit annoying to deal with, but if you keep your distance, you should be fine. He's just a simple little guy, and I like him. I have a very, very big hatred for this stupid boss. But that's because I've fought this fucker in the basement so many times when I have 0 items, and he always destroys me. If you get him later than the basement, which usually you will, he's not that bad of a fight. He's definitely the worst horseman, but I love getting free flight from him. All 4 Harbingers are here and share this wonderful spot in B tier. But don't worry, their Ultra versions will have different spots on the list. They're all very similar to each other. They float on horses, and they have 2 distinct phases. Death is probably the most annoying of the 4 due to his slowdown and scary flying skeleton horse, but they're all the same amount of fun for me to fight, to be honest. Except for Conquest, but obviously we'll get into that later. If you want to know who is above who, I would go Famine, Pestilence, Death, and then War. Peep is the bloat, but easier. He's not that bad of a fight. Just dodge the pea puddle in the eyes and you'll be fine. He's just a really solid OG boss that is always a fight to look forward to. The Gate is a really neat concept for a boss, though it's taken from Mega Moth since this is an upgraded version of them. The Gate is definitely much harder though, spamming little jumpy boys that if you don't kill fast enough, will be points he can use to chain Brimstone. If you don't get rid of them quickly, you can easily be overwhelmed by the Brimstone. But I do enjoy this fight, and it's a solid B tier. Chimera is a really satisfying fight, to be honest, and they're pretty easy. Normally I'd say being too easy would be a detriment for something this late in the game, but it's actually a breath of fresh air before you have to fight Mother, who is one of the hardest bosses in the whole game. Their attack pattern is really simple, but it's satisfying. The way the boss bounces around the room and the body shoots the brimstone is always so cool. Definitely my favorite corpse boss and a great B tier. Colostomia is a great boss that takes advantage of the poison gas that was added in Repentance. Well, not the poison gas, that's only in the corpse, but the fart gas. The fart gas. You have to be careful not to get charged or bombed by Colostomia, but it's not a stressful or crazily hard fight. Satisfying to face and not too bad for a first chapter boss. Clog is like a little downgraded version of Brownie. They'll shoot out baby black balls that bounce around, and if you don't kill them fast enough, they'll fly around the room when Clog decides to flush the water. The attack patterns are easy to learn and fun to fight against. Another decent B tier. Dingle is our third poop boss in a row in this spot. That was a coincidence, I swear. Dingle is a classic and simple rebirth boss that strikes the balance of difficulty nicely. Unless you get one of the champions, fuck the champions, still B tier though. Singe is a really neat concept for a boss, and I guess this one farts, so maybe our fourth poop boss in a row. Singe has a bunch of spiky balls around the room, and will launch them with crazy fart explosions. He's a bit tricky to fight, but has simple patterns to learn, so B tier for this little boy. The Wretched and Widow are basically the same boss, so I grouped them together here. They're both decently easy bosses, but are not afraid to stomp the shit out of you if you are not paying attention. Widow can be a little bad if you get a bad item in the first floors, but they're still fun little spiders. The Siren is another one of Repentance's amazingly unique boss fights. I don't know why, but something about singing a song to lure in your familiars to fight against you is just really cool. Not only that, but you get one of the coolest trinkets in the game by blowing up her skull after you defeat her. She's a pretty fun fight, only a bit annoying if you have a lot of familiars she can take advantage of. The only reason I don't have her higher is that she's just a bit easy and is the weakest of the Mausoleum bosses. I feel like I always just steamroll right through her before she can even use her gimmick. Still, an incredibly solid B tier boss. You either love a Baby Plum, or you hate her. Well, except I'm a bit indifferent about Plum. Honestly, she is a really neat basement boss, and is much better than a lot of the other ones that were added in Rebirth through Afterbirth Plus. Dingle, Dangle, Haunt, the fucking Turdlings. She shoots a lot of tears for a basement boss, so you can't just turn off your brain like other basement fights, but I like that. I like that she isn't too hard, but she isn't piss easy. Plus, you can choose to go pacifist and not fight her if you're a bit weaker, with the penalty of missing your boss item for the Plum Flute. And the best part, if you go to the G Fuel Seed and you happen to find Baby Plum, Triachnid and Daddy Longlegs are practically the same boss, and both appear in the womb floors, and as I said before, womb bosses are just very easy. And I will say though, that these guys are at least unique fights compared to some of the other bosses. Blastocyst. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys right here and right now, because this definitely affects some of my later on choices, but I am completely biased towards some of the original Flash Isaac bosses. Daddy Longlegs and Triachnid are just iconic bosses, and I will always love and adore them. Speaking of iconic, here is the basement worm himself, Pin. Oh, and the Frail too. They both play the same. The Frail is just a bit harder. Pin is just a simple and nice fight. He jumps out of the ground, you shoot him, rinse and repeat. To be honest, I prefer the Frail fight because he shoots more tears out, making him slightly more bullet hellish, which I like, but Pin is still great for the time that you fight him, and is a perfect basement boss. Another beautiful boss from the original game, we have the Fallen. The Fallen is a special boss that can only appear on the main path once you have visited a Devil Deal. He has a small chance to replace any boss, except for final bosses. He's a simple fight. He's just a Krampus clone that can charge at you and splits into two at half health. He can be a bit tricky if you get him early on, but the attack patterns are fairly simple. The real reason he's this high on the list is the fact that he drops a guaranteed Devil Deal item. This means, as long as you visited a Devil Deal, you could find this guy and get a Devil Deal item for free. This means free brimstones, incubuses, twisted pears. Trust me, that feeling when you get a Fallen drop that is just the craziest item you've ever seen is one of the best things you can experience in Isaac. The Forsaken is like if you took the Haunt, and made it an actual fun boss to fight. He floats around the room, spawns bonies and whatnot, and will shoot brimstone lasers. Honestly, this guy is a very simple fight, but something about fighting him is just so satisfying to me. Also, he has a sick design. Solid B tier. Reap Creep is our final B tier pick. This guy is a boss version of the wall creeps, and honestly, he's really cool. I love how unique the fight is, with him swapping through every version of the creep. He starts as a regular wall creep, shooting straight lines of tears, and then goes to the blind creep, which shoots tears in more directions, and then the rage creep, who shoots brimstone lasers. It's a really fun concept for a boss, and it's executed very well in this fight. Finally, we are at A tier. This is actually the biggest tier on the list, having the most bosses out of any other tier. Just thought I should mention that because most bosses in this game are well designed and fun to fight. I mean, hell, most of this video was spent in the B and A tier. Next up we have the Ultra Horsemen, except for Ultra Death. I'm sorry guys, but I just have to rank these guys lower than Ultra Death. Nothing against these three. They're very fun to fight, and the first time I ever saw them, I swear I shit my pants in excitement. But these three are all basically the same. They're two-phase fights that start off harder, but get easier once you knock their health down a little. I will say that I think War is the best of the three, and Pestilence is the weakest of the three. And don't get it twisted, these guys are sick as fuck, and take the first spot of A tier. I don't know what it is, but I just really like Polycephalus. He's just a cute little guy. He's not hard to fight, and his attack patterns are simple, but that's just what makes him so cool. Loki and Loki 2? Loki? I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it, but it's the split in half version. This guy is just an OG boss, and I don't have much reason to hate him. Also, he got another appearance in Repentance, which we'll see later on, and if that doesn't say Legacy, I don't know what will. Conquest is the harbinger that could. His attack patterns are like other harbingers, but really cool. He has hundreds of clones that come after you during his charge attack, and that alone just makes him super awesome and unique. He's a simple fight, and a bit easy for appearing in the womb, like other womb bosses. But there is one key thing that makes up for that: the white pony. The white pony is just like the pony that the Headless Horseman drops, but instead of being lame and only being able to dash, it makes holy beams of light when you're dashing. It can demolish bosses with this alone. It also gives you flight and speed that the regular pony does. This, along with his fight being much simpler than the other harbingers, pushes him up to A tier. Turdlet is a unique take on the worm bosses that I really like. He's a simple fight, but can be tricky if you're not ready for it. You also need to be careful when he splits so you don't get trapped in a corner. I really like early bosses that make you think while not being too hard that you want to rip your hair out. Larry Jr. and the Hollow are both OG Flash bosses that are probably some of the most iconic in the series. Well, Larry Jr. is, but the Hollow is here by extension. They play slightly differently. Larry will go in the 4 cardinal directions, while the Hollow will go diagonally throughout the room. The premise of them is the same though. Shoot the funny moving worm before it hits you. They're both incredibly simple, but they're just such iconic and fun bosses that the game would be much worse without them. I can't tell you how many times I've sighed in relief that I got Larry Jr. as my first boss whenever my item from the item room was a random 0 quality item. Next up is another 3-way tie with the 3 bosses with babies. Gemini, Steven, and Blighted Ovum. These guys are literally the same boss, but with slight variations. Like, literally the same boss. They could easily be champion versions of each other and the game would make much more sense. I mean, hell, they all literally appear in the basement floor. Anyway, that's besides the point. These 3 are all iconic bosses from Flash Isaac that returned in Rebirth. They're simple fights where the big guy chases you while the baby shoots at you. These guys fit perfectly into the basement difficulty and are nice fights for you to have at the start of your runs. The Horny Boys is what happens when you stitch Hordfell and Loki together. I don't know who would want to do this, but somebody in the basement must have a Frankenstein fantasy. These guys are just super cool though. I love the idea of taking an older boss, introducing a new boss that obviously looks like the same type of creature as the old boss, and then leaning into that by mashing them together. They're decently easy for being a Gehenna boss, but that's honestly a blessing in disguise, as the other boss you could get is a much scarier fight. I just like these guys a lot, so throw them in A tier. A lot of shared spots up here, huh? Because next we have Gish and Monstro 2. Gish has a chance to replace Monstro 2, and it's an alternative form of him, which is kind of weird considering Monstro 2 is already an upgraded version of Monstro, which is like, why replace the upgraded form? Anyways, these guys are also iconic bosses from the original Isaac. Monstro 2 shoots brimstone, and Gish shoots explosive tears that leave black creep. I don't have much to say, except these guys are cool. Next is Monstro. Okay, I told you guys I was a little biased, but it'll hopefully get a little less nostalgic from here on out. Monstro is the iconic boss of Isaac. When you think of an Isaac boss, this is the guy that comes to mind. He's usually the first boss that you'll ever face in the game, or at least one of them, and he's one of the most perfect first bosses of all time. All of his attacks are very telegraphed, meaning that you can pick up on the patterns really quickly, serving as a great tutorial for newer players, but he's also hard enough to not become super easy after you get better at the game. He is the perfect basement boss, and for that, he gets a fat A tier. Personally, I really like Mega Ma. I like the fact that he's always at the top of the room and shoots tears down at you. I have him a lot higher than his upgraded form because I find this guy's fight much more fun. The gate really just feels like he only shoots leapers and brimstone, while Mega Ma will shoot more tears out, especially in his red champion form. Mega Ma is just a real cool guy, and a great fight for the caves. Little Horn is a piece of shit, but he's a lovable piece of shit. He's a cute little demon that'll throw bombs and black orbs at you. And despite being a bit of an annoying fight, I do really like fighting him. He's not too hard to where you don't want to fight him, but he's not too easy either. I think he strikes a good balance for a basement boss, and I think he's a bit underrated. Sisters Vis are if you took the cage, duplicated him, and gave him much more unique attacks. I think the coolest part about them is how they attack in sync with each other. There's such a unique fight in that regard, and the last one will even enter a rage mode once you kill the other one. I just think they're really satisfying to fight, and they're quite unique. A tier for the Sister Visters. The Circular Flyboys are the next on our list. Duke of Flies, the Husk, and Lil Blub are all kind of the same boss. Lil Blub has some extra attacks, and the Husk is faster with spiders as well. I decided to lump Lil Blub with them, because even though he's not as iconic as the other two, he makes up for it in his unique stopping attack. These guys are just simple fights that serve their purposes quite well. Duke of Flies is a great first boss to introduce you to the game, just like Monstro. Lil Blub is a nice alternative for the more challenging alt path, and the Husk is a great upgraded version of the Duke of Flies. Gertie is yet another iconic boss from the original Isaac. I don't know what it is, but something about the fight is just so great. You have to constantly move so you don't get attacked by the flies or the tears that Gertie spits. Once you learn the patterns, you can become really good at dodging the tears, as it's based on where you're standing when she attacks you. It's crazy how a boss that's this iconic and fun can be turned into two little shit stains of bosses that are much worse than her in every aspect. Gertie will always be one of my favorites though, so she gets to reign in A tier. Here we are. Finally, we're getting to the final bosses. For those who don't know, these are bosses that spawn a chest after you defeat them. Some bosses don't spawn chests at a certain point, like Mom and It Lives, but they're still final bosses before you unlock the other paths. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to be ranking the final bosses much higher than the rest of the guys. It's not based on their difficulty though. Delirium shows that harder bosses are much less fun if they're done the wrong way, but they're also so much fun if they're done the right way. With that said, we have Satan in our next spot. Satan is one of the original bosses from the first Isaac. He's a good fight and a nice challenge. He starts off with a fight against the Fallen, which is the only reason he's lower than most of the other final bosses. After that, he appears and starts to rapidly blast you with tears and brimstone and so much shit. If you have a weaker run, this guy will 100% give you a run for your money. He ends with the third phase that's just him stopping you. It's honestly kind of lame how a cool boss like this has a slightly weaker first and third phase. If the second phase was much longer, he'd be so much higher on this list, but Satan is definitely the GOAT, and he gets A tier. Remember when I said Monstro was the most iconic boss in Isaac? Well, Mom is the most iconic final boss in Isaac. I mean, she is literally the main antagonist of the game. The intro builds her up to be some crazy monster who wants to murder her son, making her the perfect final boss for beginner players. Once the lore begins to unfold and you begin to understand the story behind the game though, you realize the truth about her. As you learn more, you also go further and Mom no longer becomes the big bad boss. Well, unless you go to Mother, but you get the point. The fight is also great, and the way she spawns all the monsters you faced previously really makes it feel like a climactic final battle for the first few times you fight her. She's also the only final boss to have champion versions, which is really unique and makes fighting her after you've already mastered her fight a bit more challenging. Also, Mausoleum Mom being a harder fight is a really great addition to the alt path. It Lives and Mom's Heart are like basically the same boss. The only difference is the monsters that It Lives spawns. So for the rest of the section, I will be referring to both of them as It Lives. It Lives is such a great fight. I love how it starts off simple by spawning a few monsters, and then quickly delves into a crazy bullet hell fight where you get bombarded by tears and eventually brimstone lasers. It Lives is also just a great final boss, and is really unsettling. You are fighting the baby version of yourself, trying to keep yourself from being born. It's amazing and ties in great with the lore of the game. But you know what's cooler than lore? Rockworms! Tough Twins and the Shell are two really unique bosses added in Repentance. They have a tough exterior that requires you to bomb them first to be able to hurt them. To help with this, there are red bomb spawners that appear in their rooms. They're just like Larry Jr. in the Hollow, but cooler. I also like how the segments on their bodies will spawn enemies and shoot at you too. These guys are just super awesome. Next is Hornfell. As I mentioned before, this is Loki's brother. He rides on a minecart and throws shit at you. I really like how unique the fight is, as he's the only boss to use a system like this to fight you. He'll go through random doors like Scooby-Doo characters and will just barrage you with bombs, taunt you with dummies, and spit fire at you. Such a unique fight, and you can even spare him after you win if you so choose.
I never do, though.
Okay, who the fuck designed Ragman? And why did they make him so goddamn hard? A lot of people shit on this guy for being a pretty hard basement boss, but god damn it, I can't help but love him. His attacks are cool, his design is cool, everything about him is just so fucking cool. The only thing I don't like about him is the fact that he heals himself. If he had no regen ability, I would have him at the top of this damn list. I will always be a Ragman lover until the day I die. The Lamb is a boss added in Rebirth to round out the separate paths in the original Flash Isaac. In Flash Isaac, there was no negative item. In fact, there wasn't even a Polaroid item yet. The Polaroid was a trinket before Rebirth. To make up for the fact that the Cathedral path got the chest added to it, they added the Dark Room to the Shoal path, which they made the Lamb the boss of. And to be honest, they did a good job at making it a worthwhile path to go. The Lamb is so different to Blue Baby, and is honestly much harder in my opinion. He has crazy homing tears and explosions, and charges really fast at you sometimes. The best part is that if you defeat the Lamb, you have the choice to do a victory lap and start the run over again with all of your items. I really like the Lamb, and he sits at the top of A tier. Oh? Where's Ultra Death? He's right here, I think. I did say that I like this guy a lot more than the other Ultra Horsemen, and I love the fact that he has no phases and it's just one cohesive fight. He goes about his patterns in the same order every time and just keeps doing it until you beat him. I just really like the fact that he does this instead of having two phases. His attacks are really cool, and the skull attack he does makes me feel like I'm playing Geometry Dash trying to straight fly. And god, the part where he goes into the darkness and his eye turns red, it's just so damn cool. Finally, we are here at S tier. This is the final stretch. Not a lot of bosses are left on the list, so let's just get into it. First off, we have the Rainmaker. Rainmaker is just a silly guy. I really like his attack pattern, and I think his fight is really fun. The way he plays around with the tears and uses them for attacks is just super cool. He's a simple fight, and isn't too hard, but that's pretty good considering he's a downpour boss. Also, Edmund McMillan himself said, "I think he's gay now. M." And hey, I'm all for representation in Isaac. Rainmaker is a gay icon, and also our first S tier. Now we have the little boy himself, Isaac. Isaac is a great final boss, straight from the original Isaac as well. This guy is such a cool fight, and the way he goes up through each phase until he literally transcends to heaven is cool. The angel phase is super cool with the holy light beams, and I think this is overall a perfect final boss for the game. It connects more with the lore of the game, being Isaac fighting against himself and his personified demons. Even the cutscene when you beat Isaac has him looking at a mirror, and his reflection turns into an evil, demonic version of himself. He holds his Bible, closing it before looking towards the corner of the room, where the chest is, where he would ultimately die. Blue Baby is a continuation of Isaac, basically. He's like the harder, remixed version of Isaac. He gets rid of his easier patterns and replaces them with more tier spam and more flies to protect him. He also teleports and is just overall harder. He is the upgraded version of Isaac, which, if you take a look at all the upgraded bosses, you'll see that they're usually decayed and skeletal. They are the dead version of the previous boss, and this one is no different. Blue Baby is the dead version of Isaac after suffocating in the chest, which is where you battle him. For those who do not know, Isaac's gameplay takes place in a sort of twisted perception in Isaac's mind as he suffocates in the chest. It is, sort of, his mind fighting through all the demons as he sits in his chest dying. Also, Blue Baby has a special skin for the G Fuel seed, and that's really cool. Hush is a special boss added in Afterbirth, and he serves as another time limit reward, like Boss Rush. For beating It Lives before the timer passes 30 minutes. Hush was the hardest boss in the game during this time, and was treated as the pinnacle final boss, and trust me, he was called that for a reason. Hush is an incredibly hard bullet hell fight where you fight a giant face on the ground who spams insane amount of tears at you, and will throw more and more as his health gets lower. He also has insane damage scaling that prevents you from killing him fast. This fight is always going to be insanely tough, even with a crazy build, and it's perfect. This fight takes pure skill, unlike Delirium, and with enough practice, you can learn how to dodge all of its attacks. And guess what? This boss is also incredibly dark. According to Edmund, this boss represents Isaac fighting his imminent demise as it grows closer, aka Isaac fighting to survive as he runs out of oxygen in the chest. This is why both Hush and Blue Baby are, well, blue. Hush is just a much larger representation of that. The cutscene for Hush shows Isaac's mom discovering his skeleton in the chest. It then shows Isaac coming out of a red chest in a gray world, perhaps hell or limbo, and a demon forms behind him. Man, who knew a game about a little child who shoots tears could be this sad? I know I've been gushing about how cool final bosses and lore and all of that is, but here's Min Min. Min Min is my favorite non-final boss in this whole game. It took one of my favorite bosses from the OG Flash game, Duke of Flies, and turned him into a crazy wisp boss. Min Min acts like the Duke of Flies for her first phase, except she shoots little willows at you instead of flies. Once you break off her outer shell, she shows her true self, which is a little wisp baby. It's so cute, and deadly. She will now have more willows around her and will shoot more at you. She can also make them come out of the floor and bombard you with tears. This fight is just super unique and super cool. Min Min is a wonderful boss. Okay, back to the lore. Mega Satan is an incredibly iconic boss at this point. He was the original bad boss from Rebirth before Hush even existed, and he really does feel like the big climactic battle. You get to fight him, and each time you get his health low enough, he spawns in the Harbingers, the Super Sins, and then the Fallen Angels. You go through all of that and kill him, but then he isn't done yet, and you have one big final standoff with his skull. He becomes substantially harder after he becomes a skeleton and starts to spray a lot of tears, becoming a bullet hell. He's super hard and is a great final boss for the game. I really like this fight. As for lore implications though, I mean, there isn't as much for this boss. You're kind of just fighting a big version of Satan. He doesn't represent anything, he is just the literal devil. The cutscene that plays after you beat him shows Isaac hyperventilating in the chest as he fluctuates from being a demon and being regular Isaac. I don't know what this represents, and I don't even know if it's the time that Isaac is suffocating in the chest, as it could just be another time he was having an episode or something in the chest. And Guppy's in there, and Guppy hasn't been shown to be there when he suffocated, so it's probably that. Mother is a super crazy boss fight, and one of the best final bosses in the entire game. Repentance really did us well with these boss fights. In fact, the top 3 of this list are all from Repentance. You'll see the other 2 shortly, but I'm sure you already know who they are. Mother is really hard, especially if you have a decent run and not a crazy run. Her first phase has some really tricky attacks that are hard to avoid. Her second phase is a bit easier, but still has a lot of bullet hell spam and other attacks that are hard to avoid. She is a great fight, and a great final boss. The cutscene for this fight doesn't really delve into lore as much as it shows us the relationship between Isaac and his mom. She sees him drawing something, which is Mother, with the word Mother written above it. She blows up at him, comparing him to his father, and locks him in the closet as he hyperventilates and imagines a statue of Satan behind him. It shows the abuse Isaac goes through and why he views himself as sinful and demonic. Since I didn't go into it earlier, I'm also going to talk about Delirium's cutscene here too. This ending is the biggest lore dump in the whole game, I'm pretty sure. It explores the things that we've seen in the game and expands on how Isaac died, and what led us to that. It shows Isaac hyperventilating in the chest and turning blue as he flashes through things in his life. He's drawing and happy till he hears his parents fighting, and visibly gets upset. A drawing of their house with "We lived here" shows. He sees his mom crying on the sofa in front of the TV. He stares at a photo with his dad burned out of it, and burned photos fill his chest. It shows all of the drawings on the wall. It starts with him happy and his family happy, and as it scrolls left, the pictures slowly get worse, revealing drawings of his parents fighting and his mother brandishing a knife, before showing satanic pictures of him with "I'm the devil" and "bad, bad, bad." His skeleton is found in the chest, like before, and he's shown wandering the gray world that he was shown entering previously. This is, for those who don't know, the true ending of Isaac. Yes, even after the beast ending, which I'll explain once we get there. This is Isaac's ultimate end, dying in the chest due to all of these things happening, and showing us things in his life that we hadn't even seen up until that point. With that, we end the S tier and move on to our final tier. Here we are, the final one, S+ tier. Thank you to everyone who's made it this far in the video, and just know that this video took a lot longer than I thought it would. I would appreciate it if you guys liked, and maybe, possibly hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. The Beast and Dogma are easily the best bosses in this game. Dogma is my favorite fight, and the most fun fight in the game. You start shooting at the TV, as he sprays tears and brimstone at you. Once you break the TV, he turns into a flying halo with wings and actively tries to ram into you and sprays feathers everywhere. It's such a great fight, gameplay-wise, visually, and musically. God, don't even get me started on the theme for this fight. It's easily the greatest piece of music made for Isaac. The Beast is also an amazing fight, spanning across the Ultra Horsemen in the 3 phases of the Beast. She'll go back and forth, going left and right, and once you hit the edge of the screen, she'll perform a random attack depending on the situation. Early on in the fight, she'll suck in fire and you have to dodge it. Once you get her low enough, she will either summon ghosts or shoot fire at you. She'll shoot a big brimstone beam after each of these attacks, and will switch sides to the other side of the screen. Sometimes she'll delve into the lava and summon fireballs to hit you too. Once you get her to her final chunk of health, she'll swap to the other side of the screen and continuously charge at you until you kill her. Both amazing and fun fights, but that's not where it ends. If you look at the cutscene for this boss, and hell, even the ascent sequence before you go to the home floor, it fills the gap of the events that take place before the game, revealing what led up to the separation of Isaac's parents, and the moment that his dad decides to walk out of his life. His connection to his father is explored much greater in Bumbo, which I don't want to spoil just in case you haven't played it, but it basically shows you the ways that Isaac connected to his dad, and the creative mind that they both share. Basically, the reason why Isaac retreats into his fantasy world and drawings to escape his abusive household. It also shows his twisted view of the situation, though, perceiving his dad in a better light than he does his mom, though both of them were not good people, especially towards each other, as shown in the Ascent voiceover. It leaves you feeling sad as you go through the Ascent, listening to the relationship deteriorate through the ears of Isaac, and it builds up into the climactic fight against the literal personification of what caused his mother to become such a devout religious person, which was one of the catalysts for his parents' separation. It is the thing that is in the intro of the game, the Christian broadcast on the television, Dogma. Even the music has this theme in it, with a preacher yelling Bible quotes in the background of the song. As you beat this dogma, Isaac absorbs it, gaining it as an item, and becomes an angel. His house crumbles around him, revealing it to be floating on a pool of lava, and the beast emerges from the pool. The beast is wearing Isaac's mom's dress, showing that this is yet another interpretation of mom in Isaac's eyes. After defeating the religious dogma that his mom was being brainwashed with, he fights with the representation of the worst parts of her, the beast. After defeating her, we finally get our good ending. The beast is destroyed from a beam of light that comes from the sky. The cutscene plays, and Isaac ascends into the sky. He sees visions of the past, slowly going back in time as he views each one. It starts with him seeing his mom mourning his death. Then, he sees his dad leaving. He sees his dad taking money from his mom's purse while she was sleeping. He hears the fights his parents used to have, feeling guilt because he felt like it was his fault. He felt the pain in his stomach in those nights, and felt a shadow in the closet. After viewing all of these negative memories, Isaac feels his fears fall from his body, all of his negative emotions leaving. After all of this, all the memories he sees are positive. He sees Guppy alive. He sees his mom and dad hugging each other. He felt his mom kissing him after he did his prayers, and then he saw his birth and the faces of his parents, and then he felt nothing. Basically, he watches his life flash before his eyes. This is it. This is what happens after he suffocates in the chest. His father then speaks to him and asks if Isaac is sure that this is how he wants the story to end. He suggests that they give it a happy ending this time. Isaac agrees, and his father restarts the story, beginning with Isaac and his parents lived in a small house on the top of a hill. There are a lot of ways to interpret the ending, but here is how I interpret it. I see it as Isaac is dead. He died in the chest, and when he died, he went to the purgatory or limbo or wherever that gray place was. But this ending is an alternative ending. An ending where he doesn't go to the gray place, but instead he fights back. The good ending. He fights back against the things that were causing him to feel sinful, to feel like he was a monster and a demon. Fighting back against these things causes him to ascend out of hell, at least in his eyes. Instead of the gray place, he ends up in some sort of heaven for him. Instead of showing us what this heaven is, they let us hear it. Isaac's father reads him a bedtime story. He let go of all of his fears, worries, shame, everything that was holding him down. In this version of the ending, he no longer feels sinful, no longer feels guilty, because he is forgiven. Because of this, he gets his heaven. He gets to live his afterlife with his mom, dad, and Guppy in a happy home. He gets to retell the story, this time, with a happy ending. And with that, I end this video. I know this one was a long one, but I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I will see you all next time.